Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. I'm Alex Greenwood, aka J. Alexander Greenwood. That's my pen name. And I'm your host for what will be Chapter 10 of Mysterious Goings On. We call every episode a chapter because that's kind of what a writer, get it, would do. Haha. Welcome to the show, though. If this is your first Mysterious Goings On, this is a podcast for and about writing and writers. It's also for readers. Everybody's welcome here. There's no admission at the door. You don't have to show your papers. You just come on in. Often it's just me yakking about my writing, which you can learn more about at pilatescross.com. We'll do more of that at the end of the show. I'm not going to give you the whole rigmarole of how to find me until the end. But also I often have guests, or we're going to often have guests, and one of our guests who's been on more than once, is coming back today because he's a lot of fun to talk to, and he's my friend. And he is the author, Jason McIntyre. Welcome, Jason.
Hello. I feel like I should probably move into a guest room at this point.
I'm thinking so as well. I really am. It's fun. It's like I told myself, you've been on 2 other episodes of the show, and this is Chapter 10, so, here we go. And I told myself, okay, I love having Jason on, but I got to get a different writer on before I have him back. And then I was just like, man,
It's too late, man. I'm moving in. I'm sending a list of dietary requirements.
Please do, yes.
And I need a hypoallergenic pillow.
Oh.
I'm kidding.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Well, one reason I wanted to have you back is because oftentimes when we're not recording a show, you and I will still either be we'll Skype occasionally, or we'll do a lot of texting via Messenger and stuff like that, and we'll talk about what we're doing. And one of the things we have in common, you and I, besides the fact that one, we're both writers. 2, we both are writing series. But the difference between you and me is the way we approach our series. And you are the writer of the Dovetail Cove series, which will be a total of 10 books, correct?
Yes, I'm hoping to start drafting the first draft of the 10th book. 9 are written, 4 are out. And it's probably the biggest undertaking I've ever done. What about you? I mean, is there 4 Pilate books, John Pilate books?
There's 4 novels and 1 collection of short stories.
Right.
And I have absolutely nothing written for anything else in the future at this moment about the series. So just, you're way ahead.
But you must bubble. You must have something bubbling. I
do. But without going too deep into this, because that's it's not really what we're talking about today, and I don't want to bore people with it. But I'm kind of taking a bit of a break from John and the gang because I've got another idea, and it's not anything that really works in the mystery genre. It doesn't really work for John Pilate, and I think I just want to, for better or for worse, flex some different muscles. And it may never see the light of day. I may write the manuscript and it may not work, it may not work, and I may not. I may just put it in a drawer, so to speak. But I think it's time to do something different. So that's what I'm working on. But yeah, to get back to what you said. Yeah, there's always little scenarios that I think, that'd be great or good in a Pilate book, so I do that. And I'm sure you do the same thing for Dovetail Cove.
I do, and I'm just thinking as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, so 4 John Pilate books and the 1 collection. I personally have read 2 of the novels, the John Pilate novels, and the collection. And I read them out of order. Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting things there is that the 4 main John Pilate novels follow John Pilate and his cast of characters that somewhat flow in and out, but they're mostly the same. Mm-hmm. And then the collection of short stories, John Pilate's not even in that. It's just those side characters and focuses on them, which is a really neat way to do that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that decision?
Yeah, I was getting a lot of requests from. I have a small but very loyal fan base for the Pilate series, and I mean, if you look at my sales, it's very small, but I love them because they love John and they love the characters. And I had last put out Pilate's Blood a couple of years ago, which was the last full novel, and it did all right and everything, but I I wasn't burned out on Pilate by any means, although I had considered stopping after Pilate's Ghost, the third book, but I couldn't. I put it down for a couple of years, and then I came back with Pilate's Blood, and I thought, well, I may take a big break from Pilate and go write this other book that I want to write. And I really did get some pressure in a nice way from readers, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just do this. I'll just write a couple of short stories and put them out on Kindle. That's all, and maybe that'll tide people over. Well, then I got an idea. I thought, well, it's, everything is Pilate's this, Pilate's that, right, for my series. So, by the way, we won't forget to mention the kind of clever thing you do with your titles, too. We'll get to that before we're done here. But I thought, well, Pilate's 2 or Pilate's 1 is not very good. And then I thought, Pilate's 7. Oh, that's an idea. And I thought, I could do 7 short stories. And I want to tell you, before I knew it, they just came out, and I think what was great about it was I didn't feel the pressure of having to write a whole novel. I just had to write by my own, cracking my own whip. I just said, all right, I have to write 7 stories. They don't have to be long, but 7 stories. And I'm so tired and bored with myself, to steal a line from Springsteen. I'm kind of tired and bored of being in John Pilate's head. So I thought, well, why don't I focus on other characters and how they feel about John Pilate, and that's the genesis of Pilate 7. It's funny, I had a reader or two say, well, shouldn't it be Pilate's 5 because it's the 5th book? I'm like, you're missing the point. This is not... And like you said, I want people to understand, they're chronological, but it's not as if you can't pick up, like you picked up, like, what? The second book first?
I picked up the second book, and yes, the second book first, and it was fine. One chapter in, and I knew who we were dealing with, where we were, what was happening, and I had enough of the bones to keep going.
Right,
totally fine. Yeah.
Well, and so that's where how I arrived at that, and then Pilate 7. Actually, I think you might have been one of the people who said, you hadn't read anything, and you read that first, and you said
yes,
yeah,
and I really enjoyed that, and it's interesting now that I go back and read the John Pilate books. It's filling in holes from the Pilate 7. Not that there was holes, mind you,
right?
But it's filling in extras, extra information, and making connections where I didn't need a connection to enjoy the Pilate 7 individual stories.
Right.
But it's like, oh, there's another layer to that. I get that. I love that. and actually, it's interesting to now go back and read the John Pilate novels and contrast even just the writing style to Pilate 7. And I would say they get stronger. I would say chronologically the writing quality gets better. And I would say that the Pilate 7 stories are really what drew me in and made me go back and look at the novels, because those stories are really, really tight and well written. And I think the joy that you had, that you just explained a few minutes ago in writing them, these short little pieces, and how they seem to just come to you as you were writing, and before I knew it, I had 7. I think you can read that in the words. I think you can feel that as you read it.
Well, thank you, and it's good also to know that they don't get worse as they go on. But
there's so many writers that do, though.
Oh, and that's a fear I have. That's something we ought to talk about someday. Is that? But and we don't want to focus just on me here. I want to talk about your series, but just to kind of put a bow on this, I think just that unbridled, And I even wrote in the foreword, I think, to the book, this is a very self-indulgent project. It's what I told people, I basically wrote what I wanted to write. I did not put a lot of thought into, okay, will this piss somebody off, or will this be, and that's the way you're supposed to write anyway,
Yes, sir, it is. Yeah. It is. And I think you and I had this conversation before I even started Pilate 7. You had said, just be a little cautious. It's self-indulgent. And you used that word, and I said, okay, whatever. I'll take that with a grain of salt. And I read it, and I'm like, if this is self-indulgent, this is the way Alex needs to go, because this writing is really good. And it's probably in part it's because you're better and you've been doing it longer. In part, it's also because of exactly what you said. You didn't worry about ticking anybody off. You wrote what you wanted to write. And I think that comes across. I really, really do. Well,
thank you. And that's one thing I've never ever thought about with you, is that you had any fear. You're a very fearless writer. I mean, what you did with Zed, which is part of the Dovetail Cove series, of course. And again, you've written all of them, and they're very keen, I think, to tell people there's no order here because they jump around in time anyway.
It's true. They do jump around in time. Primarily, it's the decade of the 1970s on a fictional island, which has not been named yet. But on this island, there's a town and the surrounding area of some farmland and some other areas that are important in the story, and it's called Dovetail Cove. And if you think about the term dovetail, I mean, what is a dovetail? Things that fit together. Right. So each of these stories fit together kind of like a dovetail, but you don't have to read them in any order. And I always get this from readers. I have such amazing readers. They'll get in touch with me and say, well, what's this new thing about? I understand it's a series. Which one should I start with? Start with whichever one looks interesting to you. Whichever one. There is no order. Now, the people that do need an order, I spell it out. I say, well, this one technically takes place before this one. Okay, I'll start there. Great. Off you go then. If you want to read them in order, go for it. It will make no difference whatsoever.
Yeah, because whereas my series follows basically a character, yours is more about Dovetail Cove being it's like a cradle for these stories. Exactly.
It's a place where all of these crazy people reside and this weirdness is happening. And each story builds on the weirdness and you're getting another piece of the puzzle. But if you read one story and only one story, you get a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're not left hanging. You're not left going, oh my gosh, that's a total cliffhanger. There are pieces that are left to explain later, but that story is complete, and you don't have to go to bed thinking, oh my gosh, I got to read 9 more books.
Yeah, that's, you know what? That is so true. I actually had someone say this to me once. They're like, "Oh, you write series. I don't have time to get into another series." And you know, it was so kind of dispiriting to hear that. But that is one thing, not a problem with your Dovetail Cove series at all, because they're all so different. I'm getting into, let's see, I've done Zed. I'm getting into Bled next. Okay. And then probably Shed, I think. I don't know. I mean, you say it doesn't matter, so I'll just go with it. It really
doesn't. But now's as good a time as any to mention to people who don't know who I am or what I've written.
Oh my gosh, I beg your pardon.
No, don't worry. I'm just thinking the titles of the books, there's a gimmick there. Yes. They all rhyme. They're all one word that rhymes with, well, Bled, Shed, Dread, and Zed. I won't name the other ones because they're not out yet, and it's kind of a fun thing. Each time a new book comes out, we do a contest where you can guess the name of the new Dovetail Cove book. And we've had some awesome guesses, and I've given away some awesome prizes. Mostly books, because that's my stock and trade, but, you know, and it's called Zed.
And it's fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. It takes place in the mid 70s. Is it 79 or is it mid 70s? I'm trying.
Zed is 1975.
75.
Each of the books has a year associated with it, where most of the action takes place. So Zed takes place in 1975.
Yeah, and there's all these little details from that time in there, and little things that. If you lived in that time, you'll catch immediately. But even if you just have a passing understanding of some of the, pop cultural touchstones of the era, they're sprinkled throughout, and it's really interesting. Now, also, there's something about this that you're doing with your series, besides the fact that it takes place in different times and that you can read it in any order, and that it's really based. All these interesting characters who some characters will repeat apparently, but it's more about the place, as that's what defines, how the series goes. Where mine's different and it follows the guy around, But the genre really shifts. Now I'm mystery, thriller, suspense right in there, and I've got my mysteries. I tell people this all the time. My mysteries are not all that hard to solve. I think of them more as mysterious situations, but generally more thriller, suspense, kind of how's he going to get out of this one kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you with Dovetail Cove are doing something a little different. You're not doing the same genre with every book, correct?
Yeah. When I kind of envisioned the whole thing, and it's a funny story. I won't digress too much into it, but I had a reader read the very first book. Before there was a Dovetail Cove series, there was one book called Shed, and a reader read it and loved it and got in touch with me personally and said, I want to see more of these two characters. And I said, well, that's never going to happen because that story's done. And then, lo and behold, the subconscious works away on things.
Right.
The next morning, I get up and I'm standing at the sink in the bathroom and I'm shaving. And I had this very, very strange experience where I lost time. And I came conscious, and I was still leaning on the edge of the bathroom vanity, staring in the mirror, but the whole thing was fogged up from the steam of the water in the sink. I don't know how many minutes I'd been standing there, not aware of my surroundings. I literally went away. And when I came back, I had the entire thing, the entire view of Dovetail Cove figured out.
Whoa.
And I know. And I knew how I could bring those characters back. So the first 9 books each have their own story and their own main characters and their own genre. And the 10th book is going to bring back reader favorites and my favorites and people that play into this big finale.
Ah.
And you're absolutely right. Shed was a kind of it's more of a classic horror story with I hope, really intriguing, lovable characters.
Mm-hmm.
Bled came out next. It happens in 1972. And it has no paranormal or horror in it. It's a thriller, and it's more of a character-driven kind of study of this character and this awful situation she finds herself in. And then we have Zed, which you just finished reading, which is really more a coming-of-age tale about a young man turning from a boy into a man, and then the reverse of that happening with another character. And Dread is a murder mystery in reverse. Which I'm looking forward to you reading that one to see if I butchered it or not.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm excited because that's the thing too. There's something to be said for writing fictional comfort food for people. I like to think I do that because people have been very kind to me and said, I feel like I'm back with old friends whenever I read a new pilot.
And isn't that great to hear that?
Oh, it's the best because and that's actually why I wrote the 4th book, Pilot's Blood, was because I missed my old friends. I wanted to hear their voices again, and the only way I can hear their voices is if I write them. And but I will say this, I did tweak the genre a little bit in the sense that, like, my first Pilots Cross, the first book, was a straight-up mystery, but it was also, it kind of introduces our characters. A lot of expository stuff that if I were writing it today probably wouldn't necessarily be in there, but it's okay. It's okay. But the second book is kind of more of a fun-loving mystery and adventure than, sea adventure. It's funny, I had a consultant tell me, you shouldn't list this as a mystery, you should list it as a sea adventure, and as soon as I did, the sales on that thing went really a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. It's funny. That's something we'll have to talk about sometime too. It's about how authors list on Amazon and the Kindle store, if you're in a crowded category, it's easier to get lost. But anyway, then the third book, Pilot's Ghost, was definitely a mystery thriller. But then with Blood, I thought, I want to kind of let the foot off the gas on the seriousness, and I mean, it's going to be serious, but I wanted to pay a bit of an homage to my grandfather, my late grandfather, who wrote Westerns, and I wanted to kind of just pay tribute to his genre, which he wrote for 50 years, but I also wanted to kind of pay homage to one of my favorite movies, which was Rio Bravo with John Wayne and Dean Martin, and it's just a great classic Western, and basically anybody who's seen that movie will recognize the last, third of the book. And I've had people tell me that, which is great. I waited to see if people would catch on. And I'm like John Carpenter, the film director. He loves that movie. And if you've seen Assault on Precinct 13, which he did, that's his homage to that movie. But he even straight up dropped dialogue in and borrowed character names for that movie from Rio Bravo. And I straight up borrowed a couple of lines of dialogue from that movie just because, out of love. It's nothing like plagiarism or anything. It's straight up homage. And I also, in the beginning of the book starts back in the Western days in the late 1800s, talk about time travel. And I borrowed a couple of characters' names, at least, from my grandpa's most successful novel.
That's fantastic.
Thanks,
Alex. That makes me want to read that next.
I hope you will.
Oh, wait, it's in line next.
It is next in line, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I had fun with that. Anyway, I don't want to give it all away, but there's a line in the third book that telegraphs, I guess subconsciously, that's what I wanted to do, because there's a line a character says to John Pilate about, basically, you don't know it yet, but you're the sheriff now. And then, so that's all I'll say about that. So it's fun to think about that with our series.
And like you said, I want to move on to other genres and other things and pay homage to past writers that have influenced me, and do different things. That's one of the great things about being a writer. And I don't think enough writers do it, to be honest. Like you mentioned, great movie directors. They play in genre all the time.
Right.
Nobody expects a movie director to put out the same genre for their entire career.
Unless you're George Lucas.
Or maybe Hitchcock or something,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But Steven Spielberg, look at him. He's one of the most successful directors in the history of movies. And he always does something different. He doesn't do the same thing twice in a row.
Yeah, I mean, you got the guy who did Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then he does Schindler's List, and
exactly.
Jaws.
Exactly.
He's done horror,
So I kind of pattern, if anything, if there's a grand plan, I kind of pattern myself more off of a director in that way.
I like that. That's a nice way to think about it.
I don't ever want to be pigeonholed as a horror writer. In fact, I don't know that I've ever written a horror book, to be honest. But people think of me that way, and it's fine.
I don't think of you as horror, but I will say I've had it in my head for a long time that you're very much a thriller and suspense guy for me, because everything, like, I think the first thing I ever read. Wait a minute. Wait, that was Shed. I have read Shed. What am I saying? That was a long time ago. I want to reread it now that I mean, that's like the first thing I think I read that, didn't I? That's bad.
I have no idea.
Well, yeah, you're going, Alex, I don't know what you read. Anyway,
As well as I know you, I have never been inside your head.
And I've read On the Gathering Storm.
Right.
That was a long
time
ago. There's
there's generally like a thriller aspect to most things. There's a feeling that something's not quite right.
Yeah. The world is a little off kilter. Yeah. And your book of short stories, which I recently read, oh goodness, I'm sorry, the name.
There's two, Black Light of Day, and now I'm blanking on the other one. Nights Gone By.
Nights Gone By. Thank you. Great title.
I put those out a few years ago, so I'm.
Yeah. If you want a sampler, folks, of Jason McIntyre, and you don't have time to invest in a novel, although you should, Nights Gone By was a nice sampler. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. Yeah, six stories, so not quite as heavy as Pilot 7. but as a tangent, Pilot 7 is a great sampler of
thank you.
Alex Greenwood's work.
Well, I think that too. I wanted to show people too, because if you look at Pilot 7, I mean, there's one of the stories that could easily be pigeonholed as kind of a quasi science fiction story. Mm-hmm. There's an adventure story. There's a little mini mystery stuff. But I have two favorites in that book of short stories I did, and one of them is really. I hate to say it in a way, but not a lot really happens. But you get deeper into a character that I just adore, and
I love those character pieces, those more literary things, and that's one of the things I loved about that collection. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, thank you.
Stomp.
Anytime if you're going to say that. No, it's just. But that's again back to the indulgence. It was like, I'll just tell you the story. The one I think that.
Please.
Doesn't, there's not a lot happening, but unless you know the backstory, but it gives you backstory, and it's a Badge. And it's
I love that story.
Thank you. It kind of gives you the events that happen right before John Pilate arrives in Pilate's Cross. So again, it has really nothing to do with him, but it has to do with the town sheriff and the new president of the college and them butting heads, and you just get in the head of the sheriff, who's a very conflicted person, a very conflicted character. So I really enjoyed doing that one a lot. And then I think I had a lot of fun with one that's about the sidekick sea captain buddy of Pilate's, Tater's Malley, and it's called Boat Drinks, and it's kind of, you're straight up, but it was, if without being too terribly self-serving, it was like an homage to Pilate's Key, which was my more successful book that people seem to really enjoy, because it was back on the boat, it was back in Key West, it was back in that thing, and that was fun slipping on that particular pair of swim trunks one more time. And
it's interesting, what you said about Badge taking place right before Pilate's Cross.
Right.
I would probably say 5 out of the 7 stories in Pilot 7 could be the first chapter of a new novel starring those characters.
Huh.
And so Badge, taking place then, it really is exactly that. It's like an unread prologue to the first book in the John Pilate series.
Huh.
In a way. And I think there's probably 3 or 4 others in that collection that could probably be the takeoff to a new world. They could be. And that's kind of interesting to me.
Well, thank you. I did one with the female heroine of the story that she had kind of a tragic past, and it was just a little glimpse of really how terribly sad and broken she was after she'd suffered a loss, and she'd had a rough childhood, and so it was just this little slice. And I've been told by a lot of people who read it, they're like, it's my least favorite of the story, but it was important for me to kind of give her some dimension. I'll confess that it's not always easy for me to write women as well as I do men, and I feel like I'm very in touch with my feminine side to be corny about it, but I don't know that I completely always capture women. You do a really fine job with the women. You really do. I mean, I really believe those characters. Is that a particular tough thing for you to get into the head of a female?
I don't know what it says about me, but I almost instinctively go there first. I recently came back from a trip to Mexico, just itching to write, and something happened to me in Mexico that kind of became the basis of it turned into a novella. It's like a 30,000-word novella. Originally, it was going to be a short story. I naturally, instinctively changed the main character to be a woman, and I have no idea why that was, and I've been thinking about that as I've been sending that novella out to beta readers, and people are asking me, another story, I like it, but it's another woman. I've written some fairly provocative novellas. Bled is one with a female central character. Walkout, Mercy and the Cat has 2 female main characters. And what I try to do is I actually try to do exactly what you said, which is get inside their heads and make it seem like it's not written by a man. And I have gotten compliments on that. And I don't know why, but I keep going back to that world. Maybe because I love women so much, and they're an enigma, and I'm trying to figure them out. I don't know, but it's something I want to do more of and constantly get better at it. Because hey, we're men. We can't totally understand it. So part of that process is understanding what we write about, or delving into something we've never fully understood. And writing for me is a way to try to understand things. So maybe that's why I keep going there.
Do your female beta readers, did they ever say to you, they read something and say, I don't know if that rings completely true? Do you ever get that kind of response, or you?
I don't get that from betas. Occasionally a reviewer will say, oh, you lost the train there. A woman would never do that. But then I'll go back to people that I know, either women in my life or female readers that I know, and I'll say, I got a comment about these earrings in this scene, that so-and-so wouldn't wear these earrings, or they're too gaudy for this character's style. What do you think? And generally the people that I go to, now they could be blowing smoke, but they say, no, I would have flagged that for you. I think you nailed that particular thing. So I don't know.
Quite good at it. And it's a joy to read. Thank you, sir. Well, you bet. I think it would be fun for us to talk sometime about the beta reading process, about just kind of the funny stuff that oftentimes, our beta readers who we love. But sometimes they just,
left field. Sometimes stuff just comes right at you and you're like, really? Out of the 9 things that I was concerned about with this book, you picked number 79 on a list that only went to 20. Like, I didn't know that would even be an issue for anybody, and you picked that out.
Yeah, okay? It happened. That's exactly what.
Which is part of the joy of the beta process. Yes. To be honest, is they can point out things that you never knew would be an issue.
Well, sadly, we're going to have to wrap this up. My gosh, let's look at us. We just went on and on again, and we could do more. And you're definitely, I'm not even asking, you're coming back again, right? I hope. I
would love to. Okay. Well, I'm living at your house now in the guest room, and you got me that new pillow.
You got to earn your keep somehow. My goodness.
I do, yeah, exactly. So. I have to pay some rent.
But I think it might be fun too to open it up a little bit here. So I'm gonna throw this out there. If you want to ask either one of us a question, if you're a writer or a reader or just casual observer, and you're curious, or if we've said something that you find of interest and you have a question, you can find me on Twitter at @A_Greenwood, or you can go to pilatescross.com and go to the Clues blog and just leave a comment there, or actually go to my Facebook page. It's the John Pilate Mysteries. Just look up, and that's Pilate, Pilate. You can go there and just post a question there, and I'll be happy to. And if it's directed at Jason, or maybe you'll ask the question, and both of us could come up with an answer, and we'll post an answer. We may use your question right here on the show. What do you think of that, Jason?
I think that's brilliant. I think, if any readers want to go find me on Twitter, I'm Jason C. McIntyre, or thefarthestreaches.com is my website. And if we have a great question from somebody, we'll put our heads together and try to figure out an answer, and either post it, as Alex said, or address it right here on Alex's podcast.
Well, it's really great that people are picking up the show. We had some really nice downloads when we first launched. iTunes named us New and Noteworthy Show, so we got some really nice subscribers out of that who continue to download the show. And if you have ideas for a topic, get a hold of us. If you have a question, or if there's something about the show that drives you crazy, I'm happy to listen. May not change it, but I'm happy to listen. We want to hear from you. And if you're a writer and you'd like to be on the show, just get a hold of me through the ways we've already discussed. I'd love to have it. One thing I'm going to ask before we go of everybody is, if you like the show and you're subscribing through iTunes or Stitcher or wherever, there's almost every podcast distribution method has a review and rating. Particularly iTunes, if you could give us a star rating and a quick review. I mean, it is quick and painless. Right, Jason? How long does it take?
Oh, less than 30 seconds.
Yeah. Just go in, click how many stars. Well, okay, look, if you really don't like this show, don't bother. But if you like this show, click how many stars, and maybe just write a quick sentence saying, enjoy the show, or I enjoy this part of the show, or blah, blah, blah. The reason why that's important is because the more high ratings and reviews we get, the better chance we'll have of iTunes featuring the podcast and getting more listeners. And if we get more listeners, we're more likely to continue further chapters of the show. So enough of the sales pitch. Again, I'm at pilatescross.com. Jason is at thefarthestreaches. Is it .com? It's .com.
It is, yeah.
Yep.
.com.
And he's on the Twitter, and I'm on the Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. So, Jason, anything else before we let everybody go?
Thank you so much for having me stay at your home and take part in your podcast. Once again, I love coming on, and I love chatting about this stuff, so I appreciate it. Thanks.
Oh, rock and roll, man. Anytime. I love having you on. All right, folks. This has been Chapter 10 of Mysterious Goings On, and as always, until next time, keep reading.
Saturday, November 23rd.
They gave me 28 shock treatments and literally raped my soul.
A must-see documentary special.
We have a society where psychiatrists can put 400 volts through the brain of a child.
Electroshock is being passed off as therapy.
Therapy or torture. Saturday, November 23rd. Only on Scientology Network. DirecTV Channel 320 or online at Scientology.tv. Saturday, November 23rd.
They gave me 28 shock treatments and literally raped my soul.
A must-see documentary special.
We have a society where psychiatrists can put 400 volts through the brain of a child.
Electroshock is being passed off as therapy.
Therapy or torture. Saturday, November 23rd. Only on Scientology Network. DirecTV Channel 320 or online at Scientology.tv.